Why do some conversations with parents escalate while others seem to build trust? Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of your hosts, along with Shelley Steele. We're retired educators who worked at adjacent school boards in restorative practices, and now we work with teachers and principals in schools in restorative practices as well. Our guest this episode is Dr. Luther Brown of Subannah EduConsulting. He's a retired principal and the author of a book, Leading from Where We Are, Challenging the Status Quo. Dr. Brown emphasizes that how we as principals and teachers speak with parents and students is shaped by our own underlying philosophical beliefs, not policy scripts or titles. To be effective, school leaders understand interests rather than positions in order to navigate the conversations with parents and other teachers through listening, empathy, and shared outcomes.
Hi, I'm Paula, an AI voice with some AI-generated text. This episode is brought to you by the phrase, interest-based communication. While this originated in negotiation theory, interest-based communication in schools shifts authority from position to relationship. Traditional school communication often relies on positional authority in a hierarchical structure from principal to teacher to parent to student. Interest-based communication focuses instead on shared outcomes like student success, safety, belonging, and growth. When interests are centered, conversations move from who has authority to what do we want to achieve together. This subtle shift often increases trust without reducing accountability.
Our website, www.restorative.ca, is for principals who navigate difficult conversations with parents, who want to make things right, and who want to make it about student learning. If you're new to your role as a principal or vice principal, say in the last 4 years, send me an email to stan@restorative.ca. Shelley's away this week, so let's join the conversation already in progress with your host, me, Stan. When you think about talking with parents, what kind of stories or situations come to mind of situations that maybe went well or didn't go so well?
Let me put this within a certain kind of frame for me. Our conversations with parents come from where we are. It comes from how we think about parents, how we think about students. It's hinged on our guiding philosophical systems and structures. So whatever we believe forms what we say and how we have those conversations. And that's where I come to parents and to students from. Granted, it wasn't always that clear to me. It became clearer to me when I started to do some reflection around writing. But I remember one incident when I was at a school where a student and family was introduced to me by a pastor to be admitted to the school because they were having difficulties elsewhere. With assurances, etc., we said yes. And we worked very well, the parent and the school. But of course, the issues that showed up are the issues that were there before. And there was this time when I really needed to have the student picked up. And the parent did not want any of it. But the context to that prior is that the parent had said, listen, I cannot afford to lose my job. If I have to come to pick him up, I am going to lose my job. And I really don't want that. I do not want that. And I heard her and I agreed. That's not what but we were in a situation where I had no choice. And I called to pick up and she came in and she was mad. Like expletives mad from the front of the building through collecting her kid and leaving.
Wow.
It so happened that the same day, I went to a workshop which was talking about culturally relevant practices. At that time, it was culturally competent practices. And while I'm sitting in there and listening, I'm reflecting on, wait a minute, what just happened? This parent and I had amazing relationship. We worked well together. So her response at the time couldn't really be directed at me personally. So what was it? So having done this sort of reflection on it, then I realized that, Luther Brown, you're really just a principal. And the parent was responding to the principal, the ethos of principal, not the guy who is in that role. And it's the principal who isn't listening, it's and so on and so forth. And so that allowed me then to stop again and to think that, look, everything we do as school leaders has to do with negotiating. It has to do with meeting interests. My interest as a principal and school leader, and the parent's interest as a parent, etc., and whomever else we're dealing with. And because I had done some work in interest-based negotiations, it clicked and I made sense of it. And as a result, my future encounters with parents were moderated because of that. And I think I learned to listen differently and to hear differently, that when we as adults or as human beings get really upset, we tend to go to our most comfortable social language. Okay. And so the way we express ourselves is through our social language. That's one of the ways. And so her coming in, expressing her rage, she wasn't going to come in and say, oh, you really shouldn't have done that, and so on and so forth. And so I learned from that. And as a result, I tailored my response and my approach to parents and community using that lens. And I always know that there is a guiding philosophical system set and structures that we employ, whether we think about it or not.
Now, I love the reflection that you did and the change that you made. Not every principal or teacher is as reflective as you are. I'm sure you've worked with staff members who didn't listen and hear as well. How did you work with and encourage them to also learn as you had from a situation with a parent?
Another sort of story. I've worked with several principals, and I remember this principal operating not from what I considered a personal space. But this principal has always been saying, let us educate the people's children. Okay. Let's make sure they're time on task. And so he was leading using the effective schools method. And so everything was centered around that. Okay. Later on, when I did the interest-based negotiation thing, part of the thing that they said is that you must always work from standards that you agree on. So when we agreed that the standard was having high expectations of each child and using the practices that will help to meet the expectations of those children, that helped to form how I responded to teachers when I became an administrator. So we always talk about what is it that we would like students to learn and be able to do after this lesson? And how will we know that they have achieved it? How will they know that they have achieved it? and what are the remediation things that must happen in order to make it work. And that became the guiding way, my GPS for managing relationships like that. And I think it paid off because I never really had negative teacher principal relationship that lasted a long time. We almost always seem to have been able to find a way through meeting our interests and through sticking with the standards. And another part of what I do too is I would say to staff, this is what we are expecting to produce. Okay. These are the tried and proven ways to get it done. And here are some things that the Ministry of Education, through its Growing Success document, has said that we can use because they're beneficial to us. But I'm also going to say to you that you are an adult professional and you can make a choice that is different from the ones that I put forward. You just need to let me know how that is going to produce the outcome that we want. And then we work like that. And I think that allowed staff to feel comfortable in their own professionalism and to know that they are being measured in terms of how they are approaching the production of schooling outcomes and not on who they are as an individual. The who they are for me as an individual come in when we talk about you have some good leadership qualities, and I'm thinking that you probably should consider taking on professional leadership role in the district. Okay. Now, I also see that as a part of my role to mentor and to do a kind of strategic invitation to people who are displaying certain the qualities that we're looking for, the qualities that I would like to see propagated in the system, and say, let's talk about that and be encouraging around that. And I've had many conversations with people who say, oh, me, I don't want to be in that principal role at all. You couldn't even pay me. And I said, that's true. You can, that's what you think. And that's where you are right now. But part of what you have been saying to students is you need to prepare now for what is coming down the road that you don't know. How about you start to prepare now, just in case? Because when you're ready, you don't want to find out that you need 2 years or 3 years of preparation.
I think that's fantastic to be able to identify that, and how encouraging for teachers too, right? To be told that, look, this is something I see in you. And leadership doesn't exist just as a principle, because the title of your book is Leading from Where We Are, which I think is just an awesome title. Maybe you can just get into that a little bit more. Like, how is it that you encourage people to lead from where we are?
Okay, so we are where we are right now. And if we see ourselves as participating in producing something, like we're participating in producing a conversation that will lead to some kind of outcomes right now. So we both are engaged in a leadership activity. We might not think it, but we are. But if we consciously say, wherever we are, let's lead from there, then it allows us to engage our GPS. It allows us to engage the outcomes that we would want and work from it. I have some examples, some stories in the book that talks about people who led from where they were without even thinking. I talk about a primary school teacher, and it's very impactful on me because then I'm 3,000 years old and I'm going back to my primary school teacher who probably wasn't really conscious of the steps that she was taking, right? But when she got the okay to put a classroom outside of the status quo classrooms, she enlisted our help. Now, these are primary school kids. And she comes and she says, okay, so this is going to be our classroom. And I'd like us to make it sort of reflect us, not her words. We were so excited, we went crazy trying to make it work. And we did make it work. But I looked back at that and I said, but isn't that collaborative practice? Isn't that encouraging people to lead from where they are? And isn't that developing leaders? And isn't that modeling? And isn't that so on and so forth? So those are some of the ideas that guide my thinking that we need to lead from where we are. Because if we're in a position and we can communicate, every time we communicate, believe it or not, we're influencing. And if we're influencing, then maybe we should make it count. That's my thinking.
Yeah. And as you're speaking, it reminds me of a situation where I was working with a teacher who was really struggling, and I was in a system leadership role as a consultant. And he was really struggling with his class. And we were working on having circle meetings together. And what I had observed was one student was constantly being sent to the office. Jack, I still remember the guy's name. Jack was constantly being sent down to the office. And I suggested to the teacher, what if Jack led the circle? I'll coach him. What if Jack led the circle? Wow. Amazing, amazing. And the teacher was a participant, and the students responded much differently because they also recognized the leadership. Jack was a social leader as well in the classroom. Wherever you can find that to encourage that, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, and if we take that example a little bit further to our general practice, we are creating the people, the leaders that are going to build what we don't know. Because when my primary school teacher was going through her thing 3,000 years ago, she didn't know I was going to be on with you. So we don't know what is going to be the production outcome of the students that we have. So we should provide them with all of the skills that we can help them with. And developing leadership, I believe, is a critical skill that we need right across the board, regardless of where you are on the hierarchical ladder.
It just strikes me too that if we could approach a conversation with a parent about the skills, leadership or otherwise, that we see in their child, that would also change the nature of the conversation we have with the parents.
And also, how about having a conversation with the child to say, now, you can't fully just say it like this, but this is what you really want to say. Tell me what's going on. But if you ask a child to tell me what's going on, they'll say, I don't know. Because they don't necessarily have the language to express this the way. But what we can do is pay attention to the things they say and the things they do and infer from that what are some of the possible things. And then you put it. So I noticed that so and so. You want to talk to me a little bit about that? Or I just saw you lead in a critical way right there just now. Keep that up, man. Give me 5 and you move on. And during the day, how about the students who are not your status quo students? They are the ones who often get sent to the office. They are the ones who often get kicked out of class, get excluded, or just ignored in class. And if you ignore me in class, how do you expect me to behave sitting in your class for 40 minutes? I am going to show you that I'm not happy with that. and I might not show you in the way you want, because maybe my way of showing is flipping over an ink bottle. I can say ink bottle.
That's the 3,000 years showing,
You
man.
got that? But how do we listen to our constituents? How do we listen to our students, our parents, our teachers? Because we all communicate what we're feeling, what we're thinking. The person who's looking on needs to, especially if you are a professional like a teacher or a medical profession who needs to understand what's going on in others in order to serve them better, then we got to put on a different kind of listening ears, a different kind of seeing eyes, regardless of whether we're blind or have auditory problems or difficulties. Scrap the word problems. We need to be able to understand, because it is through communicating that we're able to build whatever we're building, produce whatever we're producing. We can talk of the Toronto landmark, the CN Tower. It didn't just happen. Somebody had an idea, communicated that to somebody else, and then a communication web began, and then we got that. It all begins with my idea and us communicating and then developing and moving from that. That's why leading from where we are is important, but also challenging the status quo. The people who challenge the status quo are the ones who gave us, for example, the personal computers that we're using now, the cell phones that we're using now. And if you go back and listen to the stories of some of those people who have given us this thing that we are now using as, oh, it's just irregular, it's just what we do. Those are the kids who were kicked out of class or who were misfit in classes. So there is something about them. And I believe that we have to pay attention to that. And that's why our GPS is really important, because our GPS helps us to see who they are in relation to us. And it brings us into that picture, because without that, we're just people talking to people. If we're professionals talking to people, then, hey, we should put on our professional lens, which makes us be able to step back a little bit and outside of the regular me, see how my GPS is activated.
Lead from where you are. It's not hierarchical. Your influence occurs wherever communication occurs. Leaders who listen differently recognize leadership potential, especially in students who challenge the status quo. So what resonated with you? What are you struggling with in your leadership? Send me an email to stan@restorative.ca. Leading every time you communicate in a day, that's a lot of leadership from where you are. You want to find out more? Send me an email to stan@restorative.ca and let's have a conversation about leading from where you are.